Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here, coming at you with another video. Welcome back to Monster Hunter Rise, and today I'm going to be bringing you my Switch Axe guide. If you guys remember, we did that video where I talked about the most popular weapon in Monster Hunter Rise as voted by you guys throughout the community polls on YouTube, and Switch Axe was actually the winner of that video. Some of you guys are like, so why did you do all of these other weapons before you did the guide for Switch Axe? The reasoning is very simple. The other weapons had shields. The Switch Axe does not. But I still really like Switch Axe, and I particularly like Rise's iteration on the Switch Axe because it does some very interesting things to the weapon that does not surprise me all that much that it was voted as the most popular weapon after its showcase in the demo. But anyways, let's get started, and as per usual, going to be starting with the very basics. I have all of the default switch skills enabled right now, and in case you guys have been messing around with the switch skills for the Switch Axe and don't remember which ones are the default, they are the forward slash, the finishing discharge, and the Invincible Gambit. And as we move through the video, I'll obviously be adding in the different layers of complexity and talking about all of the different switch skills and which ones do I like better and why do I like them. And then we're also going to be having, a couple of combo suggestions for different situations with the monster. Now, as per usual, we're going to be starting with the very basic buttons, the X button, the A button, and the ZR. But before we do that this time around, I wanted to start by how to draw the weapon, because there's usually different ways to draw weapons, and I feel like this is something I could have done better in the previous guides. But for instance, if you're standing still and you press X, you're going to just draw your weapon and not really do anything else. If you are moving forward and you press X, you're going to do a side slash. However, you can also draw the Switch Axe by pressing ZR. That is going to draw it in sword mode. And that is kind of like the basis of the Switch Axe. It is the balancing between sword mode and axe mode. But we'll talk more about that in a bit. Just be aware that you can draw the Switch Axe in both modes. So you can draw it in X and you can instantly do an attack, or you can draw it with ZR and you can instantly do an attack and you go into sword mode. This also works for doing aerial. So like if you're in the middle of the air, you press X, you go into axe mode, or if you're in the middle of the air, you press ZR, you go into sword mode, and you can continue your combo paths from there. So just be aware that there are different ways of drawing weapons. This was a particular flaw that I've noticed in my Charge Blade guide video that I don't think I ever mentioned, that you can draw into axe mode, and that was very frustrating for me, which is why I'm making that mistake right in this video, and hopefully people will pick up on that. But anyway, let's continue on with the basics. So, this is a weapon that switches between axe and sword mode. There's going to be a couple of specifics as to why you want to use one or the other. We'll get to that. Just be aware that the transition button is ZR. So you press ZR, go into sword mode. Notice how we're now into sword mode. And by the way, this Switch Axe looks friggin' beautiful. I love the creativity behind the design of this weapon, how it's got like a chainsaw theme going to it, which is actually pretty cool for the Switch Axe. Then you press ZR again, and you go into axe mode. Now, you're not going to be able to be in sword mode all the time. If you look to the top left-hand side, you'll see the weapon gauge, that little yellow gauge there. That determines how long you can be in sword mode. So if I start attacking the monster, that gauge is going to start going down. So just be aware of that, and be aware that you will have to switch between both modes. So we're going to be starting by talking about axe mode, because that's kind of like your default. So axe has the X button attacks, which does overhead slash, side slash, and rising slash, and then repeats. It's an infinite combo, so you can do this forever, but obviously it's, considering it's just a one button spam, this is not going to be something that you're going to be doing all that often. But you know, overhead slash, side slash, rising slash, overhead slash. Now, the overhead slash gets thrown out if you are not moving. If you are moving, you'll get the forward slash. Or, later down the line, you can swap that, which we'll talk about. But yeah, for now, forward slash if you're moving forward, and then overhead slash, and the overhead slash will follow the forward slash. We'll go forward slash, overhead slash, side slash, forward slash, overhead slash, side slash. And if you stop moving at any point, it'll start doing rising slash instead. But that's the way the X combo works for the Switch Axe. Then you have your A combo. Now the A combo is more horizontal. So you can see that the X combo is usually a little bit more about verticality, which is, you know, it's got a couple of side slashes here and there, but verticality is good for chopping tails. And the A combo is more about horizontal swings, which, you know, is also good for chopping tails if the monster is down. But the A combo is going to serve a bit of a different purpose in here, which is going to give us access to a couple of different moves. Because basically, if you do a direction in A combo, you're still just going to do Wild Swing. Now, Wild Swing is something that can be comboed so long as you have stamina. Notice that each of the wild swings costs us stamina, and eventually you're going to run out. But it is an infinite combo, so you can just go up to a monster and start whacking away at him. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, and you can dodge at any point. I always like to bring up dodging with weapons. Very much like any of the other weapons, if you do a dodging after an attack, you can do like a little sidestep. Our side steps are going to be a little bit bigger because you guys know I'm always rocking that evade extender. I think the only weapon I don't rock evade extender in this game is sword and shield because I don't feel like I need it. But yeah, you can dodge sideways, you can also dodge backwards, and you can dodge forwards. Now, an important thing about the A attack with the switch axe is that it allows you to do a fade slash as well. So if you're in the middle of an attack with X and you press back in A, you're going to do a fade slash that moves you away. Unfortunately, you can't fade slash out of Wild Swing, which kind of sucks. Because I really wish you could fade slash out of Wild Swing because Wild Swing has a lot of animation commitment. But you can fade slash out of X attacks, so use that as a defensive tool if you ever need to like reposition the monsters attacking you or something like that. You know, fade slash is there to help you out repositioning. So just keep that in mind. Now, the cool thing about Wild Swings is that they enable you to do something called a heavy swing. And the way that you do it is you go into Wild Swings, and I think you have to swing it like twice, and then you press X, and boom! It's actually called Heavy Slam. I thought it was called Heavy Swing for some reason. But if you look to the top left-hand side, you'll notice that next to your weapon gauge, there's now 2 arrows pointing up. Now, in Monster Hunter World, this particular move, the Heavy Slam or whatever it's called after the Wild Swings by pressing X, that particular move would increase your part break and ability to flinch monsters. In this game, that is different because what that does is it actually gives you a sword boost to allow you to get into amped state faster. You guys are like, whoa, sword boost, amped state. The hell are you talking about? We'll get to that when we get the sword. Just be aware that usually if you want to build up your amp gauge, which I'll bring up a little bit ahead, you'll want to make sure that you activate Heavy Slam because that gets you into that buff. And the fastest way to activate Heavy Slam is basically going to Wild Swings, swing it twice, and then press X. Actually, you have to swing it 3 times, turns out. 1, 2, 3, and then you press X, and boom, Heavy Slam, there you go. And that gives you the buff for your sword amped state. There is one more move that I want to talk about before we go into sword mode, and that is X plus A gives you instant access to Rising Slash. Why is this particular move useful? Easy, to send your teammates flying. Actually, I don't know if it sends people flying in Rise. I haven't really tested out. But in World, doing this, you would send all of your teammates flying into the air. That's the main use of the skill. No, I'm joking. You can actually go into a vertical infinite combo with this move. So you can do X plus A and then press X, and then X plus A again and X. And this is actually a decent skill if you're trying to hack away at a high tail on a monster that has a tail that's a little bit higher and you can't really reach it. You can kind of like chop away at it like this, but most of the times you're not really going to be doing it. But I did want to let you guys know that this combo is there if you ever find a use for it, right? So there you go. And that's kind of like the moves that you get in Axe mode. So now we're going to be talking about sword mode, but before we talk about sword mode, I feel it is important to mention that you can interweave your switches into sword mode with your attacks. So you can be attacking a monster, right? You can be going at it with your X combo and then something like, bam, sword mode, and you do an attack following it up. Now there's 2 different morphing attacks that you can do, which one of them is a morph slash. So if I just go like this, boom, morph slash. However, if you go from the overhead slash instead, you're going to do a double morph slash. So, you know, keep that in mind while you're morphing. You ideally will want to be morphing after an overhead slash because you'll be dealing more damage. So like you see right there, the side slash into morph slash, one attack. If instead you wait it out a little bit longer and you go with the axe, right? Overhead slash, and then you swap, that's 2 attacks instantly, which it's a little bit more damage. One of the more notable transitions from axe to sword mode is the transition from wild swings, because if you're doing wild swings and you press ZR to transition, it actually will not transition. It will instead give you this attack that also moves you a little bit forward. And this used to be one of the attacks that did a lot of damage back in Monster Hunter World. I don't know if the movement value was nerfed or not, but from the values that I'm getting here, it's not striking me as particularly impressive, at least not compared to the damage that it was dealing in Monster Hunter World. However, it is still a very different transition attack, so I figured I would show it off. You do have to press ZR twice, or just spam ZR to make sure that it actually swaps, and it swaps into a morph slash. But either way, you know, the whole thing is about you swapping back and forth. You can swap back into axe mode, and ideally you want to do this before you run out of gauge, because as you see on the top left hand side, the more sword attacks I do, the more gauge I'm going to be spending, right? And eventually you can run out of that gauge, and if you run out of gauge, it will force you into axe mode. So if you want to have like a seamless transition, you want to go into axe mode by yourself by pressing ZR. And then, you know, from there you can go back into your axe combos that I was talking about. But basically just get used to swapping before you run completely out of gauge. Otherwise there can be recovery animations and stuff like that, which can get a little bit annoying. Although in Rise there are plenty of ways to stay in sword mode. There's even a Silkbind skill that actually allows you to stay in sword mode for a good long while, and you can keep using that and you can stay in sword mode longer. But now that you guys know about how to switch from sword mode and then back into axe mode, let's talk about the types of attacks that you can actually do when in sword mode. So you have your X button combo, which it's pretty much an infinite combo, very much like the X combo in axe mode. Notice that now we don't have almost any gauge. And it's a pretty good combo, you know, it's something that works. But ideally, you want to mix it in with some A combos. And once again, notice that X has a tendency to be more on the vertical side of things, either sliding up and down or, you know, from up to down to up, but it's usually more vertical. And the A is going to be more horizontal again. Now, notice that the gauge is purple because we haven't reached that little white arrow. If you look to the top left on the gauge, we haven't reached the white arrow. That means that we can't morph into sword. And if you try to, he's going to load a cartridge, but there's a lengthy animation to that. And now you can load into sword mode. But you got to be careful because that's really an animation that you don't want to be stuck doing. So, yeah. But anyway, we talked about the X combo. Now let's talk about the A combo. A combo, like I said, is a little bit more on the horizontal side, and it gives you this attack called Heavenward Fury. I almost thought it was Heaven's Word Flurry. Heaven's Word Flurry, and I was like, oh, Final Fantasy XIV reference, but no. So the A attacks are actually better at building up the thing that I told you guys about, which is the amped state. And we haven't talked about the amped state yet, so I kind of have to talk about it now so that you guys understand. But every single time that you take an axe attack to the monster, notice how there's like a little border on our weapon gauge that is getting filled up. Once that fills up to max, that is when you get to your amped state. So X attacks will fill it up, but at a slower rate. A attacks will fill it up, but at a faster rate. Particularly, Heavenward Flurry will fill it up quite a bit. So if you're trying to get the amped state as fast as you possibly can, you want to be spamming A attacks. Now the thing is, like I told you, there's that boost that you can do in axe mode to get into amped state a little bit faster. So that is definitely something that you want to be doing. And the way to get to that is, like I told you, wild swings, and then into X. Boom. The heavy slam. Now notice how the gauge, even the amped gauge swapped. And now you can go sword mode, and if you spam A, you're going to get into amped state. Almost there. One more hit. Boom. Amped state. Now, what does amped state do? Whenever you attack the monster, there's now going to be a Phial explosion. Very nice, huh? And the thing is, in Monster Hunter World, this was already a mechanic, so a lot of people will be familiar with this. The thing that didn't happen in Monster Hunter World is that your amped state now carries over into axe mode. So even if you go to axe mode, you're still in amped state, so you're still discharging like the Phials from, I mean, I'm calling them Phial discharges. It's just because it's a similar thing to Charge Blade. But yeah, basically you're dealing these extra explosions from attacking even in axe mode, which was very much a welcome change, because now you basically get to pick, do I want the axe moveset right now? Do I want the sword moveset right now? And you still get your Phial explosions no matter what. Now, switch axes have a tremendous amount of Phials. There's dragon Phials, there's poison Phials, paralysis Phials, and all of these Phials do exactly what it says on the tin. So if I had a paralysis Phial and I was getting Phial explosions onto this monster, then it would be getting paralyzed. If there's a dragon Phial, it's going to make like, I think it's going to deal dragon damage, even though dragon Phial has like a bit of a confusing description. So there's some stuff when it comes to Phials with switch axes that I'm still not completely on par with. The one thing that I can tell you is if you go power Phial, you can't go wrong, because that's the raw Phial. And right now, that is what we are using. We're using power Phial in this particular switch axe, but you definitely want to experiment once you learn more about the weapon. Just be aware, power Phial works on everything, but it doesn't make it the best for each situation. Ideally, you want to have, like, you know, different types of Phials for different types of monsters. One of the Phials that is very popular with switch axe is actually exhaust Phial, because it exhausts monsters, so, you know, they become slow, they start drooling, they give you more openings, stuff like that, which is pretty cool. But anyways, let's get back to talking about sword mode, because there's plenty more to learn. So the A combo gives you additional amped state. The X combo gives you linking of attack. So it's like, if I'm already fully amped, which one would be the best combo for me to just like unload onto a monster, right? So you got a down position. In my opinion, that would be a combination of X plus A, and that would be 3 attacks of X, and then using A to link in between them. I think it's A twice. And then before A goes into Heavenward Flurry, you will cancel it out and go into the X attack again. So 1, 2, 3. Now you're going to A, slash, 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 and now you're going to X again, and now A again. And this is an infinite combo that you can rotate while smacking a monster around. Just be aware that this combo is going to build your gauge very, very slowly. So this is for when you're already amped up and not afterwards. Okay? Now, another important move of sword mode is X plus A, because X plus A is going to do this. Element discharge. You guys are like, well, that's not particularly impressive. No, because you're supposed to spam X immediately after you do it. So if you do that, you do X plus A, and then spam X, it starts charging up and charging up and charging up until it explodes with a big explosion. Naturally, this is huge animation commitment, so you don't just want to do this out of the bloom. You want to be able that you have enough of a window to actually use this ability on the monster, and it uses up quite a bit of your gauge, but it also generates a significant, a not insignificant amount of amped state for your weapon. But the best thing to do, well, not the best thing, but one of the really fun things to do with the switch axe is doing that thing when you're in amped state, because that is going to be much more interesting. So let's just charge up our gauge here real fast. Boom. Now our gauge is charged, and now if you press X plus A and keep spamming, you're actually going to clutch onto the monster, and you're going to do a zero-sum discharge. Boom. Now that is brutally satisfying, and I know if you came from World and if you haven't tested out the switch axe and Rise yet, you're like, yeah, that's all well and good, but then the monster's going to move and it's going to screw me over. And the cool thing is that in Rise, that is most definitely not the case, okay? In Rise, what's going to happen is that when you're doing zero-sum discharge, the monster can't stop you, okay? You're basically clutched on, and the monster can do whatever it wants, and that zero-sum discharge is going to go off. And that is something that I love, because it was so frustrating back in World whenever you wanted to do zero-sum discharge, because you kind of feel like the weapon is building up to it, right? Like you're getting your sword gauge up, you're waiting for the sword gauge to come up, and then eventually when it does come up, you're getting your attacks in, and you want to get to amped state, and then you want to do the zero-sum discharge, and then you would get punished. That to me was one of the biggest things that annoyed the crap out of me in Monster Hunter World when it came to the switch axe. So this time around, you know, basically while you're on there, the only way for the monster to get you out is to kill you. And I don't even know if the monster can deal damage to you while you're doing zero-sum discharge. I should do a little bit more testing with that. But basically, it's not going to be easy for the monster to get you out of there. And yeah, that is pretty damn cool if you ask me. So now, let's talk about some of the switch skills in the switch axe. It's interesting because it's the most popular weapon, according to you guys in my channel, for the Monster Hunter that's on the Nintendo Switch is the switch axe, which also has a couple of switch skills to it. Do we need any more switch stuff on the switch axe? You'd almost think that that would be intended. Nintendo's like, no, you guys got to make the switch axe really good for our Nintendo Switch console. Never mind. It's dad jokes. Okay, I'm a father. I'm sorry. Okay. Anyway, one of the most important skills that you have right now is going to be your ZL and A, and that is going to give you the switch charger. Now, what the switch charger does is it's going to move you away from the monster, and it's going to do a little bit of a charge up to your gauge, and your gauge is going to be green, so that means that it's not going to spend when you are in sword mode for a little bit, because, you know, it was over because I was trying to explain it. But, you know, you see the gauge, it's going down, and you're like, damn, I need more gauge. You can just go ZL and A, boom, and then you can swap into sword mode immediately, and now your sword mode attacks do not actually use gauge for a little bit. So this is one of the more important skills that you have, so keep that in mind whenever you want to go into sword mode, whenever you need to fill up your amped gauge to do whatever attack you want. You want to make sure that every now and then you pop that, and you can keep the sword mode going for as long as you want, pretty much. And then you can swap back into axe mode whenever you want to, because you can pretty much do you know, flowing combos with this. Like, look, into axe mode, into wild swings, into heavy slam, back into sword mode. Like, if there are openings, there's just so much that you can do that is brutally satisfying with this weapon. It's like, oh, I don't want to run out of gauge, and back on the assault. Boom. We ran out of amped state, no problem. Keep going at it. Boom, boom, boom. Not even an issue. And that wire bug does recharge reasonably fast, as you can see. So you can just, like, keep going at it. And keep staying in sword mode for as long as you want until you build up that amp state. And then if you want, okay, I build up the amp state, now I feel like using axe a little bit more. Because axe has more stopping and tripping power, whereas the sword has more DPS. At least that's what I think it is for the switch axe. So you can just swap around as you see fit. And right now, I'm just button mashing. I know it looks like really good and whatnot, but this is button mashing, guys. I'm not even trying. I'm just swapping between axe mode every now and then. But yeah, the switch axe, brutally satisfying. Just keep in mind, switch charger to keep your sword gauge up if that's something that you need. And Bob's your uncle. Now, we're going to be looking at the other Silk Bind attack, which is... like, when I used this attack in the demo, I was like, this attack is crazy. So imagine that you're all the way over here, monsters behind you, and you just, like, jump behind, and you're like, okay, all you got to do is press back and ZL and X. Whee! Screw ya! You guys are like, oh, that's a lot of animation commitment for that there attack, Mr. Rurikhan. Yes, it is, but guess what? You have hyper armor throughout the whole damn thing. So even if the monster is attacking you, doesn't matter. You're going to go right through. Your attacks are still going to go right through. The only way for the monster to stop you if there's a paralyzing attack, which was one thing that I didn't mention in my Gunlance guide. But if there's a monster that spews paralyzing stuff like Volvidon, that can stop this attack. But pretty much, anything else that doesn't stop you or stun you, you can go through it and just smash through. Which was one of the reasons why I was like, dude, whatever Silkbind art replaces this one has to be really, really good to justify you losing out on this friggin' hyper armor insanity. Like, let me tell you guys something. You know how I used to die when I was playing the demo with the Switch Axe? I would die because I wasn't looking at my health. Because in my brain, it's like, well, I mean, if the monster isn't stopping me, if I'm not getting knocked down, it means I'm not taking damage. No. You're still taking damage while you're doing this. It's just the monster can't stop you. That thing will also work with, like, amped state. So if you happen to be in amped state... Actually, let me swap into axe mode to go into wild swings and get the focus mode from Heavy Slam. Yeah, that'll be a little bit faster. But basically, if you're in amped state, each of those attacks is going to deal Phial damage as well. Boom, ba-boom, boom, boom, boom. Which is why that move to me is so incredibly satisfying, right? But now we have to talk about some of the switch skills, actually, because we haven't talked about any of the switch skills except the default ones, right? So we're gonna start things off with one that I really, really liked. So you guys remember how when you're in axe mode and you press forward and X, you get like this kind of lunge, this forward slash? This was always a move that, to me, I've never really liked it very much for the Switch Axe. I mean, I don't know how Switch Axe mains out there feel about this move. Oops, sorry. That's just the Invincible Gambit in me. I just needed to get one more off. But I don't know how you guys feel about this particular forward slash, but I never liked it. I always thought that it felt a little bit awkward. You get a little bit of a gap closer with it, but it's just a little bit of a thrust. Doesn't even deal that much damage. But the advantage of that is that it does have low commitment. But one of the switch skills that we have on the Switch Axe actually allows us to replace that forward slash with a forward overhead slash. And to me, I was like, oh, that sounds way better. So, and that looks like this. Bam! Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm very much a part of the Unga Bunga tribe. So, in the Unga Bunga tribe, we like the Unga Bunga. Boom, like this. So you guys can tell the advantage of one and the advantage of the other one right away, and that is forward slash has much less animation commitment, but at the same time, this one has a bigger gap closer. So if you're experienced enough and you can judge the distance that you can reach with this, I think that this is a much better attack. Because pretty much after this, you can go into that double switch, remember? The double fast switch, as opposed to having to do 2 attacks before doing the switch with the double. You can go straight into it, and it is much more satisfying to me personally. I don't know about you guys. I don't know how you feel about that. But, like, basically, I don't think I'm ever going to go back to forward slash. And again, I can tell you what the advantage is, which is there's less animation commitment, but I'm used to the, I'm used to the animation commitment of the Gunlance, which is quite heavy. So having to deal with this is not a problem for me whatsoever. So basically this doesn't even change your combo all that much because your second attack is another overhead slash. So basically you're smashing twice on the head on the opener. But again, it takes you longer and there's more animation commitment. So you got to be a little bit more conservative about when you're going to use that. But to me, this is just a straight up win. The axe overhead slash, I'm in it forever, basically. So let me know, all of you Switch Axe mains out there, or anyone who after you've watched this video, if you've tested it out and you're like, no, the forward slash is better for this thing, apart from less animation commitment, and sure, I'll be able to discuss it. But right now, dude, I'm all about that overhead slash. So I'm not swapping back from that. Well, let's talk about another switch skill that we have on the Switch Axe, and that is finishing discharge to compressed finishing discharge. So guys, remember, finishing discharge is the thing that enabled us to like hook up onto the monster and you know, then do that big explosion thing. And you guys know that I like big explosions. This is why I'm a Gunlance main, right? So what does the compressed finishing discharge do? It's faster. The compressed just stands for faster. So if you press X plus A now, there's no buildup, it just explodes. Boom. It's actually supposed to hit twice. I don't know if we hit at a weird angle there or whatever it was. But it consumes a big portion of your weapon gauge. Like, notice how we just used up the whole thing. So this is a move that is basically a burst move with a lot less commitment. So it's like, if you're someone that wants to do something with less commitment, boom, go for this. It's a complete no-brainer. If you don't like the zero-sum discharge and all of that, you can go to compressed finishing discharge. This is going to be particularly good for monsters that have, you know, less windows for you to do the full attack of the finishing discharge. But personally, I still prefer the other one. Just know that there's this faster option out there if that is something that you want to do. And do remember, this thing is eating through your gauge, but you can always just do it after one of those, and it's not going to use anything at all, right? You can always use it after your charge switch or whatever the skill is called. So you could go, like, right now our gauge is super low, right? So you go charge switch, ZR into morph slash, and then into element discharge. Boom. And it's a pretty fast combo to get off, and it doesn't even use your gauge. So this becomes more of a hit and run type of thing that you can do, which is actually pretty decent if you go for, again, like I said, switch charger into ZR into X plus A. Pow! You get a pretty big burst of damage out of nowhere, but you do lose out on zero-sum discharge. Now, where I land on this, I don't know, because I like zero-sum discharge so much, but I feel like I need to experiment with this a little bit more to figure out which one I like best. I also think that zero-sum discharge gives you a little bit more leeway in terms of giving you gauge, right? Actually, no, this one also gives you decent gauge. So yeah, it's like this one is actually one of those things that there's no clear winner. It's going to depend on what playstyle you're going for and how you're feeling at the time almost. But yeah, I like them both, and I'm going to be experimenting with both, so we'll see how that pans out. But finally, we're going to see the switch skill that is going to replace the Invincible Gambit, which is one of my favorite things about the switch axe. And that switch skill is called the Soaring Wyvern. So we're going to be swapping that right now. Invincible Gambit for the Soaring Wyvern blade. And with this, oh wait, we have to also change something else for this. Sorry guys. I want to also change compressed finishing discharge to finishing discharge so that I can show you guys something that you can do with the Soaring Wyvern blade. So what does the Soaring Wyvern blade do? Well, you press ZL and X, sends you into the air. After you go into the air, it doesn't really do much. But if you follow it up by pressing X again, it does this advancing slash that then explodes. It's pretty satisfying, and it also builds up your gauge, which the Invincible Gambit does not. The Invincible Gambit does not build up your amped gauge, so keep that in mind. So you can be going like, okay, slash, 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 into heavy slam. Now I have the focus buff, and now I can do Soaring Wyvern blade, and boom, and that charges up a decent amount of your amped gauge, which is pretty damn good. You can't follow it up with an A prompt, so the only follow-up that you really have is the X attack. Like, I'm doing all of the things now, but the only thing that you can really follow up on that Wyvern thing is the X button. Now, an important thing is that you can also do this from a different attack, which is it's pretty cool, which is why I wanted to get us into the finishing discharge. So if you go to zero-sum discharge, that's going to send you flying. Immediately after, ZL and X, boom, you get to do the Soaring Wyvern as well, which is pretty damn sweet. And it also charges up your gauge, should you require, although you probably don't need to charge up your gauge, because, you know, if you're doing zero-sum discharges, your gauge is going to be already full. But it's a pretty nice follow-up because it breaks down. Why did it not? Oh, I ran completely out of gauge. Like, look, we had no gauge whatsoever. I was like, why didn't I follow that up? Because we ran out of sword gauge. So you got to keep sword gauge up in order to be able to pull off stunts like that. And as a matter of fact, let me just get that down so we can do it one more time, because I just like that move so much. It's so cool that you can do it after a zero-sum discharge, right? It's just one of those things that makes the switch axe like incredibly fun to play. Okay, so now zero-sum discharge, and then while you're in the middle of the air, ZL and X. It's so nice. And it just completely nukes whatever part of the monster you kind of like grappled onto. So it just feels really, really cool. So combos for the switch axe is actually one of those things that I've always had a little bit of trouble with, because I just tend to adapt so quickly on the fly that it makes it kind of hard to explain exactly what combo I'm trying to shoot for. But the opener, at least in Rise, for me is always going to be just moving up to the monster, pressing X, because that's going to give me that sweet forward overhead slash. Immediately after that, I'm going to be following it... Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Immediately after that, I'm going to be following it up with A to go into wild swings. And then when you go into wild swings, I'm going to be going for the heavy slam. Even if you don't hit the monster, what you're really shooting for is to get the buff, right? So after you get that buff, I'm going to go into sword mode because I want to get into amped state. And this is one of the reasons why I'm going to be running with Soaring Wyvern Blade most of the time, because whenever there's an opening, I'm obviously going to take it to get some damage in. This thing also sends you into the air, so it's going to get you out of harm's way on some monster attacks, although it's also going to leave you vulnerable to other monster attacks, so that's something to consider. And then once I get into, you know, amped state, then I'm just going to go to town on the monster, you know? I'm just going to start slashing away. The combo that I suggested earlier was actually 3 attacks of X, and then go to A, which is not what I did there. Okay, and then go to A if the monster is down, right? But it's going to be completely up to each and every one of you to figure out which attacks you want to do. If you want to go for the double A's, you remember, you run out of gauge, you press ZL and A, boom, we have gauge now. Still not that much gauge, so if you have enough wire bugs, go ahead and do that again. Full gauge now. Or, if you want, you can also just go back to axe mode, because you still have files in axe mode, so just keep that in mind. You're going to go attacking. You're going to be like, okay, got to swap to axe mode, because notice we don't really have the focus bonus from the heavy slam. So we're going to go wild swings, heavy slam, swap into sword mode, build up some gauge, monster gives you an opening, Soaring Wyvern Blade, boom! There you go, you're back into amped state. Now, ooh, gauge is low, gonna swap back to axe mode. A couple of wild swings for good measure, swap back into sword mode. You know, opening is up, zero-sum discharge. Zero-sum discharge can also follow up pretty much any attack so long as you're in sword mode. Oh, gonna finish up with a wyvern. Oh, I missed it. God damn it. But yeah, this is kind of like the playstyle that I go for. But you can also go for a different playstyle. So I'm going to be swapping Finishing Discharge to Compressed Finishing Discharge and Soaring Wyvern Blade to Invincible Gambit. So this is going to be a mode more about you doing kind of like hit and run tactics. So if this is a monster that is particularly dodgy and you have like a hard time getting good openings on him to really just unload, you can just go at it like, you know, the usual starter. I would still go for trying to get amped state as fast as possible. So that's going wild swings into heavy slam. And then I'm going to be trying to actually get a little bit more gauge because we had like no gauge this time around. Going to sword mode, trying to get a little bit of gauge, but it's going to take you longer because you don't have Soaring Wyvern Blade. But you know, at that moment, oh, monster moved away. Follow him with Invincible Gambit. Boom, smack his ass around. Swap back into sword mode. It's like, oh, I have a little bit of an opening. Okay, give him the element discharge. Boom, because it's fast. Swapping back to axe mode. Even Invincible Gambit to cancel the animation if you have to. And then, boom. Ooh, actually, I did a reload. That was really bad. I didn't notice my gauge was that low. That's the thing that you got to pay more attention than what I did with the condensed finisher, because it really uses up a lot of gauge and it can catch you off guard. Do remember that there's also the combo that you can do with ZL plus A into sword mode, into condensed element slash, and that is not going to spend any gauge at all, which is still really, really cool. And that actually got us into amped state, so we can go into axe mode and pop an Invincible Gambit to reposition if you have to. I'm not a master of the switch axe, but you know, these combos will keep you like going and will keep you in play. But that's what it is about the switch axe. It's about mastering when to swap between sword mode, when to swap between axe mode, and you know, there's a reason why my Gunlance guide is the ultimate Gunlance guide, because that is the weapon that I've mastered. And these other weapons, like, I know their moves, I learn their moves, I tell you their moves, and I tell you which ones I think they're good. But from that point onwards, you have to be your own master. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, hit it up with a like button. If you did not enjoy the video, hit it up with a dislike, because feedback is important. Thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe, peace out.